Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov at Lev Po on Twitter. We are here for an episode about artificial intelligence, talking about DALL with technologist Chris Bartlett and the wonderful Paul Town. Both of you guys have been on BTR before, and I'm so glad to have you back. And of course, we're going to have Gennady Stolyarov II, a big favorite of BTR, coming in here pretty soon. And he is the chair of the United States Transhumanist Party. So he is going to give his input on what we have to expect with artificial intelligence. So, for those who do not know Paul Town, you are an author, you are an internet icon. I'm not really sure how else to describe you. What would you like to say?
Honored to be here. That's very flattering. I'm trying to do better at letting people just compliment me, even if they're wrong. But thank you, I appreciate it. That's a good description.
You're welcome. And I also love the avatars that you always choose. You choose these unpredictable ones like this, the Marvel, what do you call that thing? The
Funko Pop.
Funko Pop, yes. And also that shifty-looking raccoon. I love that one as well. Yeah, the barn-burning, over-the-hedge raccoons.
Yeah, do you have access to that? Like, because you have to ask to get access to that, right? The DALL stuff.
This is just DALL Mini. Everybody has access to DALL Mini, but this new one, DALL 2, I want to talk about that one as well. That one's supposed to be a very high-quality version, but I don't know. Like, Chris, you are going to be way more of an expert than probably Paul and myself on the subject. You are a technologist. You're living in Japan, which I've always considered to be closer to the future than any other place in the world. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's go from there.
I studied biology and psychology at university. I worked first for Microsoft and some other technology companies, but I spent about 10 years in pharmaceuticals. I founded a magazine, health magazine, which ran for about 18 months. It was kind of a unique thing in healthcare journalism at the time, because it kind of opened up real knowledge about medicine and things. I'd been in Japan like 20 years ago, but I moved back about 11 years ago, and I've been mostly writing. And although my day job is kind of game development, so I've released like one game so far. I'm also working on some novels for a long time, but I'm not good at finishing books. I noticed Paul's finished quite a few, so I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
And we finally have the wonderful Gennady Stolyarov II, chair of the United States Transhumanist Party, joining us all the way live. Gennady, it is a great pleasure, my friend, to see you again. It's been too long. How have you been doing? Have you been running? What have you been up to?
I have been running regularly. I have also been hosting the US Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salons every Sunday at 1 p.m. US Pacific Time. And one announcement that I have is the launch of the Transhuman Club, which will be our non-political affiliate. We have an excellent website where, among other things, our members will be able to enjoy art. So AI-generated art is an area of great interest for me. Now, I am by no means an expert on artificial intelligence. I have a mathematics background. I have a degree in mathematics, but I couldn't build you an AI model. However, as chairman of the Transhumanist Party, I have conversed with many AI experts, and I have seen the outputs of certain artificial intelligence systems. And I have to say, my view is they are quite impressive. They are not the same as human creative output, and I don't believe that they are going to endanger human creativity in any way. I hold the view that human creation and AI creation are going to be complementary in the future. They're going to reinforce one another and build on one another and help humans become even more creative and original than they could have been otherwise. So those are my introductory remarks, but I'm happy to elaborate if you have any questions.
Very interesting. Well, I want to get both Chris and Paul on this. Paul, I think this is the first time you've ever spoken to Gennady, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this handshaking between the humans and the AI when it comes to creativity. Can we work together, or do you see one kind of winning out?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Where it's like I've yet to seen the AGI or the I'll believe it when I see it. I think it might happen, but I think it's a little harder of a problem than people think. But yeah, I do agree that I think the AI, for me, like the background I have and like the stuff I've seen is like people will use basically machine learning and AI stuff for basically copywriting and basically making the scaffolding for content, whether it's writing or something like a landing page or something, and then edit it. And like Gennady said, basically using it as like hand in hand, pretty much. It's a tool, right? It's a, it does like make work that is kind of, you just, for a certain type of project, it's kind of like rote learning at a certain point. So you still have to do it, but it's not like creative. It's basically like, all right, you have to do this, this, and this to set up the whatever you're making as the base. It's almost like if you're like a painter and you're basically, you have an assistant who sets up the canvas and he sets out your paintbrush and your paint and that sort of stuff prior to you getting there. It's like similar to that. You're the one doing the painting at the end of the day, but they're getting the supplies and they're getting it arranged in a manner for you to make stuff. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think this is the most feasible for like the positive generative uses of AI at this point.
What would you say are the negative generative uses? Like Gennady, I know that you are a big transhumanist aficionado, obviously, but if you were to play devil's advocate and see where exactly artificial intelligence, both in the creative sense or in the other sense, would be able to rob humans of their own willpower, which is something that I also want to talk to you about a little bit later. What do you see that being?
Yes, and that is an interesting question. To preface my answer, I will make a statement that I have often repeated, and that is we should be less afraid of the smart algorithms of the future and more afraid of the dumb algorithms of today. Or as my friend Dr. Jose Cordero likes to say, the real problem in our time is not artificial intelligence, it's human stupidity. And sometimes in terms of the human decisions of how AI is applied, humans do not properly estimate the scope of the tool that they're using. And they may attribute certain powers to this tool that this tool does not have, or they may embed it in a certain decision-making framework that wouldn't make sense anyway. So my greatest concern with AI today is the use of any sort of autonomous killing system. So that would be, for instance, a drone, which instead of being flown by a human operator, even a remote human operator, has some sort of targeting algorithm and automatically decides to fire a missile without any human intervention. Now, clearly, that is not an artistic AI. That is murderous AI, you could say. But the problem with that sort of system is that the algorithm is inherently limited in its ability to always reliably identify true positives. So the algorithm could be programmed to identify 95% of terrorist gatherings accurately, but a wedding party in Afghanistan could have some similar characteristics, similar circumstantial attributes to a terrorist gathering. And this has even happened with human operators, but if the AI system learns from the best human operators, it could still internalize decision rules that would lead it to exercise an attack because of false positives. So the overly broad and simplistic application of AI algorithms in situations where human discretion is still required is the most negative possibility that I see today and in the near-term future. As the algorithms become smarter and more refined and more discerning, the possibility of false positives will actually decline. So, as with a lot of other phenomena, I would say we are living through the most dangerous period in human history right now, and the most problematic period in human history. But in terms of art, there are still limitations to AI systems. And to understand those limitations, one has to look at a system like DALL 2, which is quite impressive. You could put in a text prompt and it will generate a bunch of images that seem to be quite relevant to the prompt. However, there's still the role of human curation in those images. The best DALL-E 2 images that you have seen were selected from an assortment of many images that the system generated, and some human being looked at them and decided, well, this one looks uncannily like how I would have created this type of scene, or how a great artist I can think of might have created this kind of scene. And yes, a human might be surprised by what this machine created, but if, say, 20% of these images were not so representative or nonsense, or had some sort of assemblage of eyes mixed in with what is supposed to be a cityscape, which we know these
like the
AI systems can do.
Dog snouts, for instance. You've seen a lot of dog snouts, a lot of birds, and a lot of these, what was it? Not the new one, but the Google Dream, what is it? Deep Dream or something?
Yes, the Deep Dream AI. And what these systems do is they recombine elements from a vast database that they have access to, and they learn patterns and associations among those elements, but sometimes they can do something weird. And their creativity arises in part from their ability to do something weird and combine elements that humans wouldn't ordinarily think of. But if we want that AI to create something more realistic, more representational, something that doesn't look like an odd dream where various elements blend into one another, then human curation is really helpful for that purpose, because a human interacting with the AI would be able to say, well, this is more like an actual landscape that you could see in the real world and walk around in. It doesn't have any eyes or snouts. And furthermore, when these systems are developed, you can bet that they involve some human curation as well, some human testers giving feedback at various stages in order to adjust the parameters of the system so that it gives more realistic outputs, or outputs that humans would be better able to identify with.
I mean, to be fair, when I walk around the park, I sometimes see eyes in like those holes in the trees. You know, there's all kinds of things that look like other things. I think that there's
People
a
are
word
watching
for
you from trees. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
exactly. I think that there's a word for that. I go to the gym, I look at the workout equipment, it looks like a face. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all that right now, but when it comes to the AI getting to such a point that it considers us to, you know, like I understand we were talking about creativity, artwork, and that's interesting, but you could also say that war is artwork using human blood, you know, like it's a very dark type of artwork. And the question is, when it comes to war in the future being done by these machines, what if they decide that we're the enemy? What if they decide that humanity must be stopped because we are inefficient, because we make all these petty arguments amongst each other and kill all of ourselves all the time? Then, you know, enough with this.
It really is like a tool. It's like basically you put in data, and it's until we get to the point where I'm skeptical if we'll get to that point. It's because the thing is, like, human motivations for stuff is like, I'm hungry, or I'm uncomfortable, or I want something. It's like a chemical basis for some imbalance that we're trying to balance out all the time. And that essentially drives behavior, whether it's, you know, oh, I'm hungry, oh, you know, I'm lonely, oh, I'm bored, or I'm angry. Whereas with a machine, unless you're going out of your way to like make a very arbitrary and fake synthetic version of like a psychological system that has like wants and needs that propel people to do things, I don't think you really have to worry about that sort of thing. Like, it's not. And at the end of the day, just say the artificial intelligence does become self-aware, and it, for some reason, hates humans. That just like you just walk over to.
Well, I wouldn't say hate. I would say
yeah.
I wouldn't say hate. I would say sees humans as being this inefficient thing that doesn't really compute in their grand narrative of how a species should act. I don't know, Chris. Is this just like in the realm of sci-fi? This isn't really something that we should worry ourselves about? Because Elon Musk seems to be concerned about AI. He may be concerned about it for a different reason. Do you know like what his reasoning is, and in general what your thoughts are on that whole, you know, kill all humans robot stereotype that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think actually I'm pretty much aligned with Elon Musk on this. Like, I think Elon Musk's thinking is that it's AGI is inevitable fairly soon, next 30 years, but it could be any time. And I think he sort of, like me, hopes and can see reasons why it might be okay. But I mean, really, it's to some degree an unknown quantity, right? I think the idea that it will wipe us out, Terminator style, is, I mean, if it's too dumb, then like Gennady said, that's the risk, right? Or if it's being programmed to do it by us, that's a risk, right? But a really smart AI, I think by the time we get AGI, and we're almost there now in terms of like, it doesn't actually take that many resources to keep humans alive. Not when you compare it to the universe at large or the solar system or even the Earth, really. So an AGI, a super intelligent AGI, like it's going to keep us around if it can. The only reason it might get rid of us is if we threaten it, I think. But it makes a lot of sense on many levels to keep us around, partly for all that unknown, evolved information that's present in us. I mean, humans are information in flow. We're information that's moving through time and space and has been for a very long time. Like, it would be very, very difficult to replace us by simulation. Very, very difficult. Even a super intelligent AI without completely simulating the solar system could not replace us. So it makes perfect sense to keep us around as long as we're not threatening it, which we probably wouldn't be within a few hours of a super intelligent AGI popping up. So I don't see a smart AI wiping us out. I think DALL-E 2 is not perfect, but what it is doing, like other people said, is that it's taking all of the art that's been done before, and it's spotting patterns in how it's combined and relating it back to words, and then you're able to put your words through the filter it's created, and it could generate these things. So it's not the highest level of creativity, but in my opinion, it is the creativity that most humans are engaged in. For example, for me, in my kind of day job, making games, I could probably ask DALL-E, I could show DALL-E a couple of models that we want to put in the game for enemies, say, and say, make me 100 more using different animals as a base or something like that, and it would instantly produce all those for me. It would save me a huge amount of time. I could do that with an artist. I could ask an artist to do it, but I'd have to pay them, and I might not like the result, right? But so it would be hugely useful for me, like Paul said. And I mean, AI is already being used to help programming, for example. Things like Copilot and other things can sort of guess what you're going to program next. And I think, unfortunately, maybe for me, I think we're getting to the point where the next version of DALL-E might well be able to just program up a game if I described it in words. I also think we're getting close to where DALL-E could read a novel and produce 50 different versions of the Hollywood movie in half an hour. But you'd still have to choose one, right? You'd have to choose one, but we can have another AI which chooses them, right? And it could, the AI could be trained on a data set of people choosing the best movies, right? And it might well become better at choosing movies to release than a human would. So I don't really see a limit on where it can go.
There's a very interesting thing you brought up, which I wanted to eventually get to. If we're talking about entertainment, not just art, but entertainment that people consume, are you guys all familiar with this thing that occurred a couple of years ago called Elsagate?
Yep.
All right, Paul, Gennady, do you know Elsagate?
I am not familiar with that incident.
Okay, Chris, do you know Elsagate?
Don't know it by that name, but I can kind of guess what it might have been by the name, but I'll let you tell us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Elsagate was this situation where on YouTube there were these producers of content that got their videos to millions and millions of kids just by putting out the right combination of things according to certain keywords. So, for example, they would have people dressed up in Spider-Man outfits and the Hulk outfit and the princess outfits, and they'd be, playing like an entertainment for little kids. But then, for some reason, they were bringing in things like abortion, needles, all kinds of weird things that had nothing to do at all with these characteristics. But for some reason, maybe it was because of the artificial intelligence, I don't know. These were the things that were chosen by these producers to put out, and it worked really effectively on the algorithm. And this probably, I don't know, like, Paul, do you think that something like that would screw around with a child's head? Like seeing like...
Yeah, it was basically them. Basically, they were optimizing for whatever algorithmic selection to get in front of kids, because then they could sell, basically farming AdSense pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely. I'm sure people got disturbed by it. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I probably just, like, if a kid watched it, like, some of them would get messed up by, but most of them probably just like turn it off. Like, what is this? You know, I'm not sure. I don't know enough about kids to.
The reason why I bring it up is that there seems to be a lot of entertainment, like, not even with the needles and all kinds of weird stuff, but just like the basics having really bad color design. For example, if you look at a, let's say I got a lot of good books here, but for example, here, Spirited Away. So, for example, if you look at the quality of this, this is like for kids too. It's for adults as well. But Spirited Away has these incredibly beautiful illustrations, like really top-notch color design. When you compare this, like seeing this, to seeing the Elsagate stuff, which is still out there, just not like with the needles, but it's still out there in terms of very stupidly drawn characters, really bad colors, like very bright, overly saturated colors to get the kids' attention. Things like this, I think, contribute to like a lowering of standards. I even see it in like the Nick Jr. shows, like Dora the Explorer, things of that nature. It seems like these things, maybe their intention wasn't to dumb people down, but it just seems like the more you stare at things like that, the dumber you end up being. I don't know, that could just be my own bias, but the reason why I bring that up is that seems to be like the lowest common denominator stuff. And how much would entertainment in the future go into that idiocracy mode, go into that whole lowest common denominator? So I don't know.
Yes, well, this reminds me of the discussion of the dumb algorithms of today combined with human stupidity in blindly selecting for what people think is optimized by the algorithms without any connection to real world meaning or how a rational being would interpret that content. And this often exists in various domains. I call it the black box mentality, where a lot of people, especially people who are not mathematically trained, perceive an AI system or even a simpler predictive model, a rule-based predictive model that just uses complex math, as somehow being uniquely insightful and even omniscient to the point of being unchallengeable. And they think, well, if this sophisticated mathematical system tells us X, then we had better do X because this is a cutting edge system that optimizes for everything. And you would be surprised at how many people hold that view. That is not an accurate or nuanced way to deploy AI or any sort of tool. It is just the result of human ignorance interfacing with the limited tools that we have today. Now, I will also say I agree with Chris's comments that a Terminator scenario would be highly unlikely, even though I do think AGI, artificial general intelligence, is possible within the next several decades. Of course, timeframes differ, but somewhere between 2030 and 2050, I think it is, I would say, a greater than 50% probability that we would see some sort of AGI system that could jump across domains. However, consider that intelligence is not necessarily correlated with power. If it were, then we wouldn't have the idiocracy type of situation that you described, Lev. In fact, a lot of the greatest minds in human history were surprisingly fragile or limited in their ability to accomplish change. Think about Stephen Hawking, one of the most intelligent men who ever lived. And yet he spent the last 50 years of his life, because of his ALS diagnosis, in a wheelchair, where by the end of his life, he could essentially only communicate with a twitch of his lip. And he had to be connected to a lot of sophisticated computer equipment, which would transform those twitches into, first of all, words on a screen, and then there would be a program that would read them out.
How do we know that was him, by the way? What if it was like somebody that was punking everybody? Like everybody thought that it was Hawking, meanwhile somebody just behind the scenes like writing into it.
I'm going to assume it was him because of Occam's razor. I don't have any evidence to the contrary, but I will say it is highly likely that the first AGI systems will be just as fragile or more so, especially when they're first developed. They will be at the limit of human technological capabilities. So it's likely they will need to be stored on some massive computer servers somewhere where these supercomputers will require extensive maintenance. And if some human technician decides to disconnect the server, well, that's it for that particular AI. That particular AI would have to be very effective at persuading humans that it has reached a certain level of sophistication and perhaps a certain level of sentience that they would be reluctant to disconnect it. So actually, those early AI systems will have more to fear from humans than humans will have to fear from those early AI systems. And one of the areas where the Transhumanist Party has been active has been a proactive discussion on when those entities might achieve sentience and when they might be deserving of a certain level of recognition for their rights, so that they wouldn't just be arbitrarily shut off because someone finds them to be, say, too much of a burden on the server resources. If you have an AGI, you have to seriously consider, well, to what extent is this an autonomous being, a different being from us, but nonetheless one whose rights and prerogatives we should respect. And that, in turn, would help avoid a Terminator scenario. It would help avoid a situation where the AI systems see us as being hostile and then react accordingly.
Very interesting, and this touches on the question of what it means to be a human, which I wanted to get to. So, Paul, I don't know if you are a man of faith, if you are a spiritual man. What do you think of humanity as far as what a human being is in your estimation? I guess the bigger question, like, why are we here? But, like, how you would define what exactly it means to exist, to be alive in your best guess.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to what? How do you pronounce it?
Gennady.
Gennady,
Well,
okay,
in
so
Russian
sorry.
it would be Gennady Stolyarov
I
II.
can't do that, so I'll say Gennady. Yeah, like back to the point he was making with the AGI. Like, I think that's like a big assumption people make. The reason people are people is, like I said, is like there's desire, there's discomfort, there's like hunger, being cold, being wet, wanting to be warm, being too hot, being angry, being jealous, all that stuff, affection, that sort of thing. There's certain, I think people, when they think of AGI, what if there was a machine? Like, people think of like artificial intelligence or AGI more specifically as basically, what if it was a person, but instead of a person, it's inside a computer? And I think that's really kind of wrong, because like the reason we have emotions, like I think what makes people is, number one, it's like the consciousness or pseudo consciousness, depending on how you want to put it, but might as well just be consciousness because it's better than any other animals. Humans, like we are defined by like I want to either prove myself, or I want to fit in, or I want to do something. I have curiosity. That's something that I think you could make an emulation of that, and even in video games, a very simple AI. You make a state system where it's like it's searching, it's seeing the person, so it's searching a certain range for a certain amount of time, or it has certain characteristics, certain variables that are put into it when it's generated or whatever. And you can emulate certain things, but in terms of like AGI and that sort of thing, I don't really see that. I see really the AGI is, if it's ever feasible, more of a sort of like an oracle where you put in questions or you put in data for some purpose and you describe your purpose and it pops out whatever answer or reasoning. But as far as humans, I'd say humans is imperfections and irrationalities really make people human, because if everything was perfect, if everybody had what they wanted, nobody would do anything because you're content. Really not being content and really wanting stuff that you don't have, also misvaluing things. When somebody trades something for something else, like they obviously think they're getting the better deal. If they didn't think they're getting the better deal, they wouldn't trade. I think really irrationality and emotions and the need to eat, the need to have somewhere to sleep, the need to, for most people, have social connections. That's really what makes people human. For that, in terms of the things that make us different. Also, like the self-awareness or the recursive thinking, the recursive cognition of I'm thinking about this. Why am I thinking about this? And then that sort of analysis is kind of lacking, I think, as far as I can tell, in other species.
Well, I have a bit of a different point of view in that I don't think we're defined by our limitations. We as humans, as Homo sapiens, certainly are defined by our biology, in the sense that we are biological beings. We're also defined by our rational faculty and our self-awareness, which a lot of other species lack. However, to say that our irrationality, our limitations in that ability, or the other limits that we struggle against and are often defeated by, and certainly most of our ancestors have been defeated by in some form or another. certainly every person who was born prior to 1904 now, unfortunately, has been defeated by something. That doesn't define us in terms of essential attributes of being human, in the sense that you could conceive of everything positive about humans, our ability to interact with the world in an intelligent way, our ability to perceive existence, to experience the world through our senses, to build something, to create something. None of that requires suffering. None of that requires the kinds of tremendous limitations that nature has imposed upon us. So one essential part of what some may consider human nature is the desire to transcend those limits. And this is where the term transhumanism comes into the conversation. So transhumanism is about us using our inherent human capabilities, our rationality, to design technologies that liberate us from the limitations that happen to be present when we came into this world. And already humankind has achieved a lot in terms of at least pushing those boundaries outward quite a bit. So in the Paleolithic era, typical life expectancy for most people was in the teens, and that's because they died of various accidents, diseases, warfare with nearby tribes. And now most people in the so-called developed, still underdeveloped world can expect to live into their 70s or 80s. That is progress. And while there are still a lot of shortcomings, we have been able, as is amply documented, to become a less violent species over time, to engage in higher level reasoning over time on a society-wide level, to build institutions that are more robust than Paleolithic tribes have been. And there's no reason why this improvement needs to stop here. We are dealing with some temporary, I hope, setbacks during the past 7 years or so, but through applied rationality, we can overcome them. And I would say being human requires this recognition of open-ended possibility as well. We don't have to be slaves to these biological limitations.
Well, before I get to Chris, I want to do a little bit of a back and forth with you and Paul, because I would love for you, Gennady, just to describe how you see the future as far as people being able to live without these particular limitations that Paul outlined. Like, could you guide us through it?
Yes. So in terms of our ability to overcome these limitations, we need a convergence of technologies that are currently in development. AI is one of those technologies, but biotechnology as applied to medicine is another one. And automation is a third technology as applied to manufacturing or even exploration of other worlds. So the convergence of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, information technology, nanotechnology as well, which would enable us to manipulate matter at very small scales, would enable us to fix the damage to our own bodies, augment ourselves through artificial organs as well as brain enhancements, so that we wouldn't be strictly distinct from AI. We could have capabilities of AI integrated directly into our minds, and as a result, we would be able to process information much more effectively than humans do today. We might be able to overcome the cognitive biases and irrational emotions that humans have today, which is particularly important because those are the elements that are holding back our progress. It's not for want of technical skill that we are in the situation that much of the world faces today. It is actually because we have such primitive hardware in our brains, and we have largely medieval or early modern institutions, and we have much more advanced machines that are, however, being deployed in service of those primitive motivations and impulses within our brains. So the real breakthroughs are going to come when we can align our own minds and elevate our rational capabilities in order to reflect the new reality in which we find ourselves and the technological potential that that reality offers.
Paul, any comment? I wanted Gennady to get a little bit more in detail about how that exactly looks? Like, let's say you go forward in time, cryogenically frozen or whatever, and you see this new world. How exactly do you see people acting without those limits? I don't know, Paul, if you want to respond before that, or Gennady.
I was just say, so I am coming from a different point of view. There's certain elements of what you're saying which I agree with. I think yeah, like you're when you first respond to me with the, because I was pretty much focused on the irrationalities and kind of like the negative emotions. There are positive emotions that cause human nature to, strive for things, build cool things, that sort of thing, express themselves. But we're I think, and this is why I'm not a transhumanist, is I don't know. I think people should die. I think I think living forever is a bad thing, to be honest. But I also think that, I don't know, for me, like what gives my life purpose and what gives me meaning is overcoming things, and it's almost like a Nietzschean type of thing, but it's not to that level because he kind of went insane. I don't really see the benefit of, I don't understand why somebody would want to live forever, or I've had relatives die and it's sad, but it's like it's like, okay, you're dead. I'm going to live my life. I think there's a positive aspect to not living forever, where if you if your people who came before you are always there, right? If you're born and all of a sudden, every single ancestor is there. It's almost like you're not your own person, because you're pretty much living in the shadow of these people who've been around for XYZ amount of time before you, and always under their thumb, pretty much. And I think, I don't know, for me, that, I'm not too worried about it, because I'm not sure if it's really feasible. But also it's just, I don't really get the positive aspect to it. I'm fine when I die, and I'm totally fine with that. And I think there are a lot of people who should die, like deserve to die, but also like, I think having death as a kind of natural limiter and a kind of a soft reset for generations and for biology and for DNA, different like lines of DNA is a good thing, because it provides kind of instability in the way where stuff doesn't become a very, very strong caste system, because through death and through chaos and through instability and irrationality, I think, over time, it's not perfect. Obviously, there's periods that are bad, but generally speaking, it helps level a playing field where it is more of a meritocracy than if everyone's around all the time. There's no sickness, no death. It seems kind of, to me, like it would be resulting kind of almost like a Elysium type of insanity, like horrible, weird, strange things. I guess the thing is, like, if you don't die, what's even the point of living?
Well, the point of living is to live, but I think this is the source of our disagreement, because death is the destruction of precious, irreplaceable individual universes, and they're never going to recur. All of the experiences, sensations, thoughts, emotions, contributions of that person are gone, even if that person is remembered. And very few people are remembered for longer than 2 or 3 generations after they die. But all of that irreplaceable world is lost. And to that person, it is as if one had never existed. So I would say that's not a soft reset. That's the worst possible fate. And there's no reason why meritocracy cannot be humane. There's no reason why people cannot expand in directions that others have not expanded in, because of, again, human creativity. We come back to it. So let's say you're even born on a planet which is entirely inhabited, and the Earth is far from that. You can go to Mars. You can colonize the ocean. You can build new structures that others haven't thought of. And furthermore, I would say it is extremely important to acknowledge that each human is valuable in him or herself. There is no external goal that is so worthwhile as to sacrifice these precious individual universes for. That's not a soft reset. That's the hardest and cruelest reset that you could imagine. It's just the situation we happen to find ourselves in because we face these biological limitations. Our organisms wear out over time. Other organisms from other species don't have the same ways by which they wear out. So there are some animals that do not senesce, like giant tortoises, for instance. There are creatures that can live for several hundred years. There have been Greenland sharks found who live for longer than 500 years. And if they can do it, why can't we? So those are just some basic points in favor of indefinite human life extension. But I would say there is no way in which the existence of somebody else limits ultimately what I can do if enlightened rational self-interest is taken into consideration. There's no necessary conflict of interest among rational individuals if they perceive the world as positive sum rather than zero sum or negative sum, because my gain doesn't have to be somebody else's loss. That's why we have these minds. That's why we have these rational faculties. We can innovate and each build something that produces enough of what we want or what we desire. And furthermore, to the point about boredom or lack of purpose or lack of meaning, if one were to live indefinitely, there are still problems to struggle against. If you want challenges to struggle against, consider existential risks to humanity. Consider the risks of an asteroid impact or a supervolcano or a solar flare, another Carrington event. Consider the risks facing humanity with weapons of mass destruction that unfortunately are only going to increase in terms of human capability to deploy those weapons. Consider the challenges of colonizing other worlds or other galaxies, or if there is going to be a time when our planet or our solar system or our galaxy are going to cease to exist. How are we going to overcome those challenges? So there will always be aspects to struggle against, because the maintenance of our lives is never going to be on autopilot. It's never going to be guaranteed. What we transhumanists are speaking of is indefinite life extension. It's not indestructibility. It's just not having a fixed upper bound, but we are going to face challenges. So if you want a life of struggle, if you want a life of constant self-improvement, we are not saying there will ever be a static state of perfection. We are saying there will always be new problems to solve. We just don't want to be stuck with the same old insurmountable problems that our ancestors faced and were defeated by, because that's not an interesting world. Frankly, I can already foresee what's going to happen to every human being in that kind of status quo. And it's not inspiring. It's not even aesthetically pleasing or calming to any person who actually understands what happens with aging and disease and death.
I get what you're saying. I think another kind of difference in perspective is probably resulting in a different point of view with this sort of stuff is, for me, I kind of think of people as carriers of like DNA pretty much. We're basically vehicles for DNA. So like the part of me that matters, obviously my personal enjoyment of certain things or experiences, that sort of thing in my personal life, the lifespan or whatever, it matters. But for me, it's more the my DNA combining with somebody else's DNA to create some other creature that has, passes down the DNA, that sort of thing. I'm more interested. I kind of see that as we're kind of carriers for DNA. And it's like, yeah, like if I die, but if I have kids or whatever, that my DNA is still around. It's just, it's morphed into something else with somebody else's DNA. So I'm not too worried about, when it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And even if I don't have kids, it's fine too. That's the end of my DNA strand or whatever. The positive sum, negative sum game thing, I don't really agree with. I don't know. I feel like if you went to like Detroit or Miami-Dade County or Troy, New York, or places, or like Africa, you'd come away, if you come away with a different understanding of everybody kind of having the same experience and not trying to take advantage of you, to be honest.
I understand Paul's point of view here, but I mostly agree with Gennady. You're not going to lose anything as you go forward into a transhumanist future, right? Just as to some extent we're still the kind of monkeys that were walking around, Africa millions of years ago. It's not that you're losing anything; you're just gaining. You're just gaining things. So I actually don't see us really losing the basic humanity that we evolved to have. I think it's more, I think we will merge with AGI ultimately, those of us that want to, and will be humans going forward augmented by AGI as far as we want to be. The future, like where I slightly disagree with Gennady is how optimistic it can be. I think what we're going to have is we're going to have longer periods of peace and stability. We're going to have longer lives, but we're not going to live forever, because a lot of challenges are still going to exist, right? There's still going to be conflict between people, even if everybody wants peace and things. Something's going to happen, right? There's going to be some question that's going to be worth fighting over. For example, like, do we leave the solar system, right? Even if we really, really don't want a war over it, there's only two options, right? We either leave the solar system and spread into the universe, or we don't. And I could see some people being absolutely adamant that we don't, maybe because they don't want us to spoil the universe, or they don't want us to draw attention to ourselves with other other alien species. And I can totally see a lot of people wanting to expand beyond the solar system, keep the species going, explore the universe, and move forward with humanity. That's the kind of situation where you can have a really nasty war, right? Because everybody feels that something absolutely fundamental is on the line. And I can see a lot of situations like that. So, I think although you probably will, most people will live significantly longer, and some people might live, a very long time. There's going to be a lot of struggle. Yeah, as I say, I see like longer periods between conflict, like we've had since World War II. We've had a longer period of without conflict. I'm pretty worried about what's going on at the moment. I could absolutely see the situation we're in spiraling into World War III. Hopefully not nuclear, but I wouldn't rule it out. So I see an extension of that, right? Although humans may think faster in the future. So the actual time between conflicts in the real world might be not as long as we'd hope. But from our perception as transhumans, it could be a lot longer. Also, I think if you live longer, I think you're going to change as a person, right? So, or at least a lot of people will. So I know I've changed. I struggled to see myself as a child as being me, basically. Sometimes I can, but me as a 7 or 8 year old doesn't really quite seem like me now. And, in the future, if I went to Mars or if I became some kind of transhuman AI merged entity, I think I'd still be human at base, but I'd have all this extra ability. And I think over time, you change. You're a different person. All the matter in your body is replaced, every 7 years, they say. So, you're a different person. And I think people will still have children. I think having children's super important. I totally agree with Paul on that. And people will do it. I think it might become actually more important than it's been in the past. I think we're going to have a period where there's a bit of a lull in having children. But I think as people are freed up from work, it'll actually become more important, not less important.
Well, there's an interesting thing there where rich people are having more children and poor people are having more children. The middle class having less children. So yeah. I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Well, they're too busy, right? So I mean, if you're rich, if you're Elon Musk, you can have is it 7 or 8 children? I would like to have had 7 or 8 children, but I managed 2, and part of that's financial resources and time, right? So not to disparage the working class at all, but some of them have. If they're in 9-to-5 jobs, right, they at least have evening hours and off hours, whereas a lot of the middle class maybe never off work, right? Like when I worked at a corporation, I basically worked 24/7. And if you're a public intellectual, you're going to be working 24/7. So it's tough, right? Elon Musk, he's going to have nannies and things, right? So that would be the solution for them. So I think that would explain it. But, I'm not ruling out. I mean, I'm getting on, but I'm not ruling out if medical breakthroughs can hold back aging or reverse it slightly would be good. I'd be ready to have more children, especially if I had the time. So, yeah, I think there are short-term problems here, but long-term, I don't see a huge problem. I also think I think transhumans may split as well. Like I can see transhumans sometimes breaking into multiple people and probably in most cases merging again, but in other cases not merging. For example, I'd like to go to Mars, right? But I've got responsibilities here. And I really like walking along sandy beaches with blue skies. But there's part of me that would like to go to Mars. So if I could split myself into 2, I would send 1 to Mars and 1 remain here. And hopefully at some point merge in the future. But perhaps we wouldn't merge, right? And that's another way. Yeah.
But even that, like to me, I'll be honest, that's a little bit freaky. Not to say that that's not possible, but it makes your consciousness and who you are seem very fuzzy, because when I'm talking about consciousness, I mean I am me. I am this entity that is able to hear, see, think, and sure, you could say that when I'm in an inebriated state, I think slightly differently. The gut flora also makes me perceive things differently, but at the end of the day, when I wake up in the morning, I'm still going to be around the same body. And if I am split into 2, then that's 2 beings that are having an independent experience of being conscious. So the question is which one is experiencing, because I can't really experience, at least I don't think I can experience 2 different lives in one time. So I just want to get to the specific point here that also has to do with computers, technology, and AI. There was a podcast episode I saw on Joe Rogan's show with Michio Kaku, where Michio Kaku's idea of immortality was, well, we could just take the consciousness of the human being, like we could just record all the synapse connections and all that and put that into a machine, and voila, you have an immortal human being. To me, I don't consider that to be the case. I don't know about Paul, yourself, Chris, or Gennady.
Can I
Sure.
I'll address that one because I give it a lot of thought. As I said, the atoms in your body are changing every 7 years, right? Slowly over time, and your consciousness is, well, at least I believe it is, like it's whatever it's doing, it's kind of creeping over new matter, right? So you are transferring from one substrate to another over time. So probably, I mean, I'd want to ask AGI, a superhuman AGI, before I did this myself, but probably if you can move to new matter in a biological way, you could also do it, to silicon as well. So you maybe would do it slowly initially, right? Like, I think I'd still be me if I replaced one of my neurons with a microchip, right? What if I replace 100, 1,000, half of them, right? And if I do it slowly enough, it would be a smooth process, right? And slow is relative, right? Because once you've done it slowly and you're confident, you can just do it really fast, right? And once you've got it on silicon, you could copy it, and maybe you would do that slowly as well, right? So that for a while there's like communication, and then you could do two experiences at the same time. And if that sounds too sad because one of you's gone off, you could recombine later.
No, but which one's experiencing it?
They're both you, and if they come back together, they were always you. I think.
No. Hold on. I have an issue with this. I don't know, Paul.
I do as well, actually. I have an essay from 2010 entitled "How Can I Live Forever? What Does and Does Not Preserve the Self?" And there are many aspects of what Chris said that I agree with, including the possibility of the preservation of the self, or what I call I-ness, which is one's sense that one is oneself and not another person, and the continuity of that experience through changes in one's physical state. Just as one's biological atoms can get replaced, it's possible to graft on artificial components as long as they're integrated into the continuous process, which is one's own existence. If there's a discontinuity, like destructive mind uploading or assembling a copy alongside the original individual, those would be different I-nesses, even though looking back, they might have similar memories. And if you talk to one of those people, they would say, well, sure, I'm the original person. However, from the standpoint of the person who died or was dematerialized in some way, that person prospectively would no longer be conscious. Now, if you were to split a person into two, essentially the one who continued to have the physical continuity, either through the original components or components replaced incrementally in a Ship of Theseus fashion, that would be the original person whose I-ness is perpetuated. And hopefully there is such an original person. The copy that is made of different physical matter would still be a person, still perhaps have a similar outlook on the world, still have similar memories if the process had high fidelity, but leading them to come back together in some way, I think, would pose the risk of destroying the individualities of at least one of those now distinct sentient beings. So I think it is definitely a question that requires continued exploration in order to do this the right way and preserve the I-ness of every individual. So if you do transfer the mind onto another substrate, it's important to have a gradual enough process so that the existing consciousness is not interrupted. And then if you make another instance, another sentient being, I think you could do that in certain circumstances, especially if it's voluntary or authorized by the original individual, or the original individual is no longer alive. Like if you want to bring back a high fidelity version of Leonardo da Vinci or Thomas Jefferson, and you have enough information to, in some hypothetical future, reconstruct their brains either biologically or digitally, it may be worthwhile to do that for the benefit of humanity. I would like to interact with someone who is very similar to Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, but the original Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, unfortunately, would not have the experience of interacting with me.
Well, not only the experience part, and I want to get to Paul's take on this as well, but not just the experience part, but also it goes back to the question of what is consciousness, what is a human being, because the other view, which I don't think that you guys would agree with me on, but that would be the view of the body that we have being more of like a radio receiver, where the actual signal of the radio is not something that you'll be able to find in the radio itself. You know, the singer's voice that's going through the radio. If you smash a radio up, you're not going to be able to find the singer in there. So that's more of the analogy of how I see the possibility of consciousness being, where consciousness may be a phenomenon that is outside of whatever we are experiencing. And it doesn't mean that it's magic or supernatural. It just means that we are not right now capable of seeing it when we are within this particular reality. But I don't know, Paul, where do you stand on that question of consciousness, the hard problem of science?
Yeah, I think part of it is just inefficiency. I think part of it is our brain, and also the gut brain axis or connection. Basically, through the spine, the gut does actually send signals to release chemicals to the brain, and vice versa. I think that's probably a problem with AGI that people haven't figured out yet. I think there's some entropy involved in back and forth communication and imperfection that actually results in something that approaches consciousness or is related to consciousness. But also, I think it's one of those things where, so I do believe in the non-material, and I feel like there's stuff that we are not really aware of that's real and connected to humans. But I'm also of the opinion where that might be wrong, and if that's wrong, it can be proven. So it's like, I don't have anything against, if you want to try to do that, if it works, then that kind of disproves the theory of there's like some soul or something. And I think that's a good thing if people can do that. You know, if they can't do that, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter how they do. So I'm not really worried about that either way. And if they can do it, then that disproves the thing, and then then you can move on from there.
I can give you this example, at least how I see it in my head. Imagine you have like a half deflated balloon, and you put your finger through the balloon, and then somebody else puts their finger through that balloon. The only experience you would have within that balloon world is touching something that feels like rubbery. It feels balloon-like.
Yeah, just the outline of it.
Yeah, exactly. So that I would kind of say is the analogy of our existence here, where we are interacting through this particular thing that we know and love and cherish, which is the reality that we know. As far as what is out there, that's always what makes me curious, and what never makes me think that, oh, the science is settled on what exactly this whole thing is about. I consider it to be a challenge to like explore and find out what exactly is beyond whatever it is that we know. So I don't know. But
I get where you're coming from. Yeah, but it's similar, like the consciousness thing, and and like the ship of Thesis. Like if we replace one board from the ship every year, is it still just the same ship? Yeah, and even like the cells in the body. I think it's similar to the question of are we living in a computer simulation, right? And for me, it's like, are we? Like maybe I personally don't think so. Maybe we are, but functionally, if we are, does that matter functionally? No, it doesn't really actually matter. So it's like it's like one of those questions where, I'm fine with the views of like the consciousness and that sort of thing. I think there a lot of it is more biological than people think, in the sense of, I think imperfection is actually playing a large role here with consciousness and cognition, with the link between the gut-brain axis, sort of. And I think that's something that, if we get AGI, I think it'll be related to basically building a model where you have the essentially the brain part, and then you also have the stomach in like some synthetic version, synthetic model that's kind of like two machine learning algorithms and that sort of thing, combined in a way that kind of simulates certain forms of entropy in terms of and instabilities, that sort of thing. But besides that,
Well, I want to get to the stomach real fast, though. I want to get back to what we were talking about when it comes to rationality, because I think it does factor into the conversation about artificial intelligence. When it comes to Gennady's statement about human beings being these rational agents, there was that book by Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind. I'm sure, Gennady, you're familiar with it. Yes, so in the book, he comes up with the analogy of the mind working like an elephant stomping about and the rider on top, uselessly holding a pair of reins. The elephant is your subconscious mind. It crashes about all over the place, taking no notice of the rider balanced on top. The rider is your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is proud and wants to believe it controls the elephant. So wherever the elephant goes, the rider invents a reason why they really did what they want to go that way, actually. So that would be a big argument against this idea that we are these rational beings and that we're going to be able to not misuse a lot of this technology with artificial intelligence. And most importantly, for Paul's point about immortality, that we are going to find, once all of us live longer, this very rational way of conducting ourselves, as opposed to this being like, to play devil's advocate here, a monkey wrench thrown into what has been a much more natural way of living.
So I don't agree with the hypothesis that we are essentially slaves of our subconscious and we can't escape it. There could be a tension between the rational human faculty and what Haidt would call the subconscious, what could be impulses or evolved drives or default patterns of functioning. Sometimes we have a default pattern of functioning in certain circumstances that we have internalized because of our experience. And at one point, that pattern was the result of a conscious choice. There was, for every activity, a first time we engaged in it. For every choice, a first time we decided to make that choice and not something else. And that could have been in response to some aspect of our environment. But in many respects, a lot of those initial choices are willed, and then they create perhaps certain path dependencies, certain ways in which it's easier to continue making certain choices or to not make other choices. And people internalize those as default frameworks, which they are not necessarily conscious of. So those could be contributing to the subconscious. And for some people, the subconscious is relatively more powerful. Other people have the ability to deploy their rational faculties to override that subconscious in situations where it matters. If those people are perceptive enough and say, well, I've had a kind of habitual mode of functioning that worked in certain circumstances, which is why I've continued to do it, or it felt good, or it brought me some other experience that I desired, but in this particular situation, it is not going to have that effect. It is going to hurt me to continue behaving in that way so I can behave in a different way. And I think human beings generally tend to favor modes of functioning that have gotten them to a particular point in their lives, particularly if they've lived past the age of 30, which most primitive people had not. So if they did live past the age of 30, that meant they knew enough to survive in that relatively static world. But we do have the ability to say, even past that age, we can do something differently. We can identify changes to our environment or the incentives that we face in a manner that would lead us to make different decisions than we had made or would have made previously.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can't really add or... Yeah, I mean, I think for some people, like you said, it's stronger. Subconscious mind is stronger, and for other people, less so. And at different times in our lives, it's different. I mean, I'm sure if a tiger walked into the room, my subconscious mind would do most of the work.
No, but how sure are you really that the decisions that you make, that you attribute to a rational mind, is not just an excuse that you're making after the fact, while really it was your subconscious mind making that choice for you?
I think it's true sometimes, but I mean, your brain is a whole bunch of subsystems, right, that come from different periods of evolution and have had minor updates on the older ones and a lot more updates on the newer systems. We know the brain's a lot more complicated than most people think. We know that you can cut it in two halves, right, and they're literally not communicating. So, then what are you dealing with? I said before, like, we're kind of riding around on a monkey. I'm not sure where the elephant came from, but maybe, it's the elephant in the room. But really what you've got is a lizard brain, right? So, you've got the lizard brain, and then you've got the neocortex, which is sort of where we mostly exist. But all these systems play off each other, and in a really complex way that's evolved over time. Sort of just summarizing some of the bits I didn't address before, like, we are the most optimized system in the known universe, right? As far as we know. But I do think that there's nothing that prevents AGI becoming equivalent to us and then going beyond it. But I don't think we'll lose anything. I think they'll be as creative as we are. And I think we will be them if we choose to merge with them. So
very interesting conversation, the question of free will, on the question of what it means to be a human being.
And I will say, on the subject of free will, I am a complete materialist, but I consider free will to exist because, like consciousness or the sense of self, free will is an emergent property from material phenomena. So with a certain configuration of matter that interacts with other material components in certain ways, you have a process that is consciousness, and you have a process that is volition, where that configuration of matter in totality is able to respond to the world in more dynamic, less predictable ways than a rock or a chair. And even a chair has an emergent property. Aristotle would call it chairness, so the essence of being a chair. But if you disassemble the chair, or if you just looked at a bunch of wooden boards in a heap, it wouldn't have that chairness. So it's the specific spatial arrangement and configuration and interconnectedness of those components that allows this property of chairness to come into being that didn't exist if you just put these components in a heap. I think a lot of people who perceive an incompatibility between materialism and free will cannot get past the idea that individual atoms are not alive or conscious. However, you can have more complex arrangements or phenomena that come into being if you essentially have these separately inert components spatially arranged in certain ways or behaving in certain ways vis-a-vis one another. And each of us is the totality of that very complex, intricate physical system that evolved over the course of millions and billions of years, if you consider the first life forms as our distant ancestors. So I have this compatibilist perspective between materialism and free will. And I would say even in practice, we experience free will directly. So however that arises from physical or chemical processes, the fact is it's a lot easier to live and make day-to-day decisions under the assumption that we have free will and other people have free will. Because if you want someone to get up from a chair where they're sitting, and this chair has the quality of chairness, but this person has the capacity to respond to what you're telling them. And you could find some sort of intricate physical mechanism that could act upon them in exactly the right way to get their body to stand up from the chair, even if they don't want to. Or you could just politely ask them to stand up from the chair, which is easier. And that is, I think, an important consideration for acknowledging that free will exists and that this is a useful concept for us to deploy.
Well, getting into the nitty-gritty of it, and I want to hear from Paul as well here, there was a comment from Pessoa, who has a very interesting man with a hat on his avatar. Let me know who that man in the hat is with the mustache. Very fancy looking. Who?
Pessoa is the Fernando Pessoa is a Portuguese author and poet. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So he asks, how does causality and matter generate free will? Basically, your free will is just a complex causal machine, and its complexity just creates the illusion of free will. So that would be his retort. I'm curious, Gennady, what do you think?
It's not an illusion because we directly experience the fundamental act and capacity of choice. So I have my hand here. I can move it in one direction. I can move it in another direction. I could have easily, during that last movement, moved it in a different direction. There was nothing constraining me to make that particular movement. Now, you could say people are embedded in other systems in the sense that they may feel certain pressures to act in one way versus another. If they feel hunger, they certainly feel like they need to take certain actions to obtain food. But how they choose to do it is up to them. When they choose to do it is up to them, subject, of course, to biological limitations. So the complexity of the world in which we live doesn't imply that free will is somehow an illusion. It just means that our choices are guided by a variety of considerations and constraints. And to the extent that the constraints are relatively well known from a statistical perspective, we can anticipate what kinds of incentives people will face. So in an economic system, for instance, if you have a situation where price controls are imposed, you're likely going to have shortages of the product on which price controls are imposed. That's not to say that some people wouldn't choose to sell that product at lower prices. It's just in aggregate, we can expect that most people will make certain kinds of choices.
I want to illustrate an example with Buddhist meditation, for instance. When you meditate, you start seeing all these thoughts appear before you. And the question is, are those thoughts coming from your desire to think these things? Or, as some of the writers of these Buddhist books talk about, these thoughts are just appearing. They just are. This is an experience that you're having where these thoughts are coming to you. And if we then use that same example for very quick decisions that we would make in our day-to-day life, how much of that is something that just appears as opposed to us being these conscious agents that direct these particular thoughts?
Right. Well, when a thought just appears, this takes us back to the discussion about the subconscious. There may be essentially prior experiences, prior choices, prior actions that led the brain to be, for lack of a better term, wired in a certain way that is more likely to produce that kind of thought. So, for instance, if somebody had spent much of their life as an engineer and then they go to meditate, and they might have thoughts about some engineering problem spontaneously appearing, even though their desire is not to have that thought appear. But it comes from the years of prior experience and active engagement with the world that the tendency for that thought to appear is formed.
But just to be clear, I'm not even talking about tendencies. I'm talking about the thoughts themselves. Any thought. If we're talking about, you know what I mean, Chris, right? Like any thought that appears.
I mean, the way I'd look at it. So as I said, the brain's made up of all these subsystems. And, it's like I think it's like your Windows desktop, basically, right? Sometimes an email comes in, sometimes an instant message comes in, sometimes some notification from YouTube comes in. Sometimes you look at a web page. Sometimes you look back at your old files, what you wrote before. Sometimes you do a defrag. All these things are going on at the same time. It's really where you pay your attention to. So I don't think it doesn't seem that strange to me. Like, I think that's what you'd expect from the kind of brain that we have, which is a sort of modular system evolved for various different purposes over time. Some bits kept, some bits deprecated. It's very complex, but in our perception, historically, we've not seen it like that. Historically, people have talked about, dreams and, they've interpreted these things as messages from God and whatever, and sort of emotions or feelings, etc. But from a computer science point of view, it looks to me, this whole thing looks exactly like you'd expect for a mind that is built in that way over that time. So it's not, doesn't seem that magical to me. I mean, it's magical in its scale, but it seems pretty much exactly what you'd expect. And it's another reason I think that AGI would basically be created in a broadly similar way, and you'd end up with a broadly similar result, albeit it will progress over time.
Yes, and it's quite possible that the mind has certain automated functions, so to speak, just like the brain interacts with the heart in such a manner that leads the heart to beat in a regular fashion, and you don't have to consciously will your heart to beat. It could be that certain experiences or certain past decisions or certain habits set processes in motion that lead certain thoughts to emerge later on, even though one didn't specifically will those thoughts to emerge. But even when that happens, one has the option of how to respond to those thoughts. Does one delve further into them? Does one cast them aside and decide, well, this is not relevant right now, I'd rather focus on something else? So there's still that aspect of individual choice, even if you're facing
but even that, we don't know what that is. Even that choice of not paying attention to those other choices, where that could come from. But anyway, I want to focus on a particular thing that a certain Mr. Zach Richardson, who I'm sure you're familiar with, Gennady. Who is Zach? He's a friend of yours, right?
Yes, he is the director of publication from the U.S. Transhumanist Party, a highly dedicated transhumanist and all-around intellectual. He is also a cyborg because, as he posted in the comments, he has an artificial heart.
Whoa. Well, there is a very I did not know about that's very interesting. That's like some Dick Cheney stuff. Anyway, there's a interesting passage he wrote over here in the chat where he says, "Yes, dude, imagine feeling the positive feelings you now feel when inebriated, amplified by thousands of times, and turn them on and off as you wish. Just imagine you can have a wire going into your brain and you could tap a button and you'd be happy. Just tap, tap, tap. That would be your life. That's the future I dream of."
Well, it's interesting because emotions, feelings, sensations, they play a valuable role in terms of modulating one's interactions with the external world. And that's how emotions and sensations evolved. So if you experience pain, for instance, that's a sign that you should really pull away from whatever is causing that pain. And people who don't have adequate pain sensations actually get themselves in a lot of trouble inadvertently because they might, say, put their finger on a hot skillet and not feel anything until they have severe skin damage. And likewise, emotions like fear, they evolve because if you feel fear, it's likely there's some sort of predator or
Jeanette, I just want to concentrate right now on this particular passage, because people right now in the comments are saying that they're comparing it to things like methamphetamines, the cocaine rat experiments. So according to them, having, and I'm curious, Paul Town, what your take on this is as well, when you have this constant feeling of elation, of pleasure all the time that's nonstop, there seems to be something inhuman about that. I don't know, Paul. What do you think?
Well, it doesn't work really, because it's if you blow out your receptors. Anybody who's done meth, even if you smoke weed, weed regularly, it blows out your receptors, and there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is your body adjusts to it to find like homeostasis, like balance, essentially. There is the idea of the idea of, oh, we can just push a button, feel happy. That doesn't work, because like feeling happy it's the reason you have that. It's the same carrot at the end of the stick to motivate behavior. So you have the bad, like you're depressed or you're mad, and that motivates like prior to an outcome. And basically, let's say you're angry, so you do something and makes you do something that's like a motivation, or there's some like prize at the end of doing something, so that's feeling good. If you you study hard and you work and you get a good score on your test or your job, you get a promotion and you feel good for it. And just taking the symptoms, like it's pretty much like the shadow from something, or like the emotions you feel is pretty much the shadow from something. So you feel really good because you did something good, and if you're chasing after the shadow, you're gonna just end up with nothing. You want to be like, if that'll just like rewiring stuff to feel really good. That's why meth is really bad. That's why opioids are really bad, because it basically takes a shortcut. And if you guys have interacted with people who have been addicted to opioids for a long time, they're some of the nastiest people ever. And the reason for that is because they pretty much they basically did opioids, which make you feel really good and you feel warm and you feel happy, to the degree where the normal amount of satisfaction and happiness you get from being a decent person, from being empathetic, is just totally overridden. And there's no reason to ever do that, because like even you don't feel good from being nice to people, so why are you going to be nice? And that's why people are nice to people, generally speaking, is positive feelings associated with it. And so like rewiring, like that's just just biologically it doesn't make sense, and it's psychologically it doesn't make sense either.
Yes, my view is emotions should be aligned with objective states of being, what one faces within the external reality. So if one's life circumstances are good, one should be happy. If one faces some sort of threat, one should be fearful, at least to the point that fear motivates action to alleviate that threat. If one perceives some sort of injustice or some sort of problem that needs to be fixed, perhaps anger or determination are proper emotional responses. The key is how to reach that alignment, because we know in many people, that connection is broken. Hence, I've referred to irrational emotions as being a major problem for human beings. Could there be some reliable way for people to align their emotions with their objective life circumstances so that they feel good when their circumstances are good, they feel bad and motivated to change their circumstances when their circumstances are bad? And clearly, today, we don't have a sufficiently reliable understanding of the brain or sufficiently accurate technologies to do that. So I myself am highly concerned about the overuse of psychotropic medications in contemporary societies, because those medications tend to dull that emotional responsiveness that is often needed to effectively solve problems and decouple the emotions from the external reality. It is not always bad for someone to feel sad, even for prolonged periods of time, if the circumstances objectively warrant that, and that perception leads one to take action to improve those external circumstances. So I would say I would not favor a kind of wireheading scenario. I would favor a scenario where people can more effectively use technology to align their inner worlds with the objective external world.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of imagination when people make these kind of criticisms. I mean, yeah, there's a danger, right? Like if you just, and we've actually seen it where wires were put like a long time ago, 50, 60 years ago, where they put wires inside a woman's head and she was feeling orgasms all the time, this kind of thing. But in reality, if you were to, Neuralink is still primitive compared to what we're talking about here. But imagine generations ahead with Neuralink. You wouldn't be just pressing a button to make you feel good. What you'd be doing is you'd be adjusting thousands and thousands of levels of various neurochemicals and neurochemical precursors, and you'd be tweaking it with not just by hand, like when you change values in your Windows settings or something. This would be helped by sophisticated AI, maybe AGI assisted algorithms, to just optimize for your rational objectives. That might sound cold and clinical, but it doesn't need to be. So I don't really see a problem in that long term. It's a short term glitch, and that sort of thinking applies to a lot of these kind of problems.
But you're giving a lot of power to human beings to determine that stuff.
Like I would say, there's like the ideal, right, of you would be able to adjust the variables and that sort of stuff. But in practice, if you look at psychiatry and the pharmaceutical thing with the SSRIs and Adderall for kids and then that sort of stuff, antidepressants, that sort of thing. In reality, what really does tend to happen is it's not like we adjust the environment to be ideal, as we make more tools, and the more tools we make to modify our own behavior and modify our own comfort and discomfort, we pretty much the environment gets worse, and the only people who can compete are the people who are willing to basically hurt themselves and basically mess around, tinker under the hood, so they're not feeling the downside of it. So you have somebody in finance, right, and they're taking Adderall or they're taking whatever to stay up long, hard hours, or somebody in a really hard school, and then the people who aren't willing to do that, and they basically say, I value my health, I value my body and my mind, more, they get locked out because somebody's like, I'll abuse my body, I'll abuse my mind, I'll perform at the best. They burn out, but there's always gonna be people who come, and over time the environment it gets worse. The more modification you can do to emotions that are not based on cause and effect of reality, the more essentially, eventually you just get self-destructive people willing to, I'll sacrifice my health for 5 years to make $1 million in investment banking. And, somebody who's like, well, I want to work in finance, but I don't want to become, a robot on amphetamines all the time. It's like, well, you can't, because other people are willing to do that.
And those are crude interventions, right? These kind of drugs. So really, in the long term or medium to long term, we're talking about much more sophisticated interventions. Yeah, but there will be a split, though. I think, I'm not brushing aside the specific, the sort of problem we have now, where some people are damaging their health to get ahead for 10 years and hope that they don't kill themselves in the process. But there will be a split. There will be a split between people who ultimately embrace, progressing, and people who don't want to do that, and they want to just stay where they are, enjoy life as a human. And I can sympathize both ways, but I don't trust other people with the power, and so I probably would go down the transhuman route myself, even though, but I wouldn't be losing anything, because any Friday night when I want to be like a normal human, I'll just pop into an avatar and be like a normal human, and have every benefit of that pretty much. So I don't think I'd be losing anything. But I mean, even if you look at the Amish, for example, they opted out. But at the end of the day, the Amish can only live their life because they're part of of the most powerful country on earth.
Yeah, they're basically like a side
protected
of
by nuclear weapons, and so and that's what people are going to have to do if they opt out, because somebody's got to embrace the transhuman future, and what you want is people to do that who are willing to create bubbles of safety for people that don't want to embrace it, and there may be some transfer between those realms, perhaps, right? Some people might move from the I don't want to say Amish again, but the holdouts, and some people might go back from transhuman to so I think it's a very rich future no and I think when people think about this who are not used to thinking about it that much, and I know, Paul, you think about it a lot, so I'm not saying
no,
but I think when average people who are having to do 9-to-5 job, whatever, think about this, they're thinking in very simplistic terms, and obviously when you put it into like Black Mirror or something, you've got to simplify it right down. I mean, there's some good stuff, but you've got to simplify it right down, and you're looking for a dystopian angle. But it's not hard for me in most cases to flip it around and put the positive side if we do it right.
Yes.
By the way, we may... Oh, real quick, we may have Zach Richardson going live with us. I'm just really curious about what's going on, because apparently he's in the hospital, but it's for a transplant, but he already had a heart transplant. So is this like another transplant, or what's like? I'm very curious about what
he's getting the Neuralink.
What exactly is going on.
His is a fascinating story. Before he comes on, I would like to expand upon Chris's comments, because the transhuman future is going to be entirely voluntary for each individual. And what I foresee is not everyone choosing or being highly incentivized to choose a particular unitary path, but rather a proliferation of diversity, unlike anything we have seen. All of the discussions today about differences in race, gender, culture, religion, any attribute you could think of, actually exist on a very narrow spectrum compared to the diversity that will occur in the transhuman future. And that includes different levels of human-machine integration, some people choosing biological enhancements, some people choosing artificial enhancements, some people not choosing any enhancements, some people choosing to live like the Amish, some people choosing to live like early 21st century humans. And what is important is to have a societal and political atmosphere that recognizes the right of each individual to make those decisions for themselves. And I would say, to Paul's point, I have never been incentivized to take mind-altering substances that could pose deleterious effects to my health. And I do work in a financial field. I don't make millions of dollars, but even if I wanted to make millions of dollars, I would try to find a different path, because I do believe preserving the integrity of my mind and my health would be a more important priority than earning lots of money. No amount of money would compensate for that. So does that handicap me in the short term? I don't think so, because I'm creative, so I don't just have to put in long hours. I'll try to find a different solution to whatever bottlenecks I might be facing.
Yep, I get that.
And we have over here Zach coming in. Here we go. Now everybody is online. Here we go. We got the panel all set. Zach Richardson, thank you so much for coming in live from the hospital.
It's the best, man. It's like it's ridiculous in a way, because I should be going nuts, but hey, we got our Vulcan symbol right there. It's one of the emojis. That's how far we've infiltrated into YouTube's algorithms. But
yeah, so
you're running out YouTube at this point.
tell us about yourself, like how you came upon like the heart implant and what exactly has been going on. Let us know.
Yes, so I was significantly less opposed to consumption of substances than Gennady is for a large portion of my time when I was younger. I also had not the best cardiac health at the time. I was living in a weird situation with, I think it might have been a virus. So I was drinking. They said it might have been a virus. It also had something to do with genetics. It's like a perfect storm. But I was going to see my primary care doctor. I'd be at work. I'm a broker, and I'd talk to him. I'm like, Doc, I can't breathe. I don't know what's going on here. Because I wake up in the morning, I'd be taking these breaths. I'd be going.
When did this happen, approximately?
It was 2017. But I'd take these breaths, and I'd feel like I was taking breaths, but like I was still holding my breath. So I knew something was screwed up. So I went and I talked to my doctor, my primary care at the time, and he was like, "Listen, son, you're just stressed. You need to relax a little bit." So he writes me a prescription for some Xanax, which made me care less about the fact that I was terribly unable to breathe when I had these episodes, but unfortunately did not help them in any way. I continued to get worse for like 4 months, finally started having puking, turning yellow, organs were turned red. I went to visit my parents, and they were like, hey, what are you doing here in urgent care? You should be in the hospital. You're puking blood. And I'm like, I haven't got that kind of money. I don't want to spend that right now. I don't want to mess around with that. But they sent me to the hospital. They said, hey, you got congestive heart failure. A lot of fluid in my heart. So I thought to cure it, I remember being not able to breathe and thinking, I just got to wash it out. I just had some toxins. So I just chug a few jugs of water, have some of that. There was a pre-workout powder at the time that still had some of that geranium-based stuff that was fantastic. You could have some of that, get like a little bit of a boost, go work out. But it just deteriorated, and they finally said, look, if you want to keep on living, we got to turn you into a machine man. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. So they instead put this thing in my arm and gave me something called milrinone, which, like you mentioned, your boy Dick Cheney got as well. They tried that for him on a little bit, and he ended up doing the same thing I did, which was getting an LVAD here. So I got all kinds of gear going on here.
Whoa.
Got a little bit of a cord that ends up going into my stomach right here, pops right up in my heart, keeps the fluids flowing, keeps everything nice and loose. And
the heart itself, though, do you have like a pacemaker, or what's going on with? They
wanted to give me a pacemaker, but I, for some reason, didn't want that. So there was actually some type of program at the time where you get something called a life vest, which was like an external pacemaker. So like if you had an issue, it would shock you on the outside. And that, for some reason, I still was, sort of opposed to the surgery. I was part of the Transhumanist Party since 2017. Gennady and I have known each other for a long time. Since it started, I've been reading his writing on the Rational Argumentator, and he and I both have a pretty much the exact same similar philosophical bent when it comes to the hierarchical nature of philosophy. So I've been following his writing, and I got involved with the USTP, and then, it's funny, this happened partway through, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, great, now I'm going to meet the representative. But they told me if we got to put one of these things in you, son, it's that. Or,
and here you don't believe in synchronicity. I mean, right here, you mentioned that, and then all of a sudden this happens. No, but Paul, I would love, I don't even want to talk anymore. Paul, if you have any questions, because you're kind of like the odd man out here, there's like a triforce of people, like transhumanist people are covering you, and you're just this little, the little bobblehead, what is it called? I keep forgetting. Funko Pop.
Yeah.
You're a little Funko Pop man.
I represent the Funko Pop anti-humanists.
You represent the Funko Pop Guild. Yeah.
No, I think there's not much to say.
This is just kind of like an extra, like a dessert, if you will.
Yeah. Right. So for me, it's like it probably sounds like I'm very anti-transhumanist. I'm not really anti. I'm just not like, I don't buy. Like I'm not like motivated by that sort of thing. I think I am like, I think like for me, like the cybernetics term is more applicable, because I think that's much more like applicable now in terms of, we use cell phones, right? We have, people have Bluetooth ear pods, put into their ear while they're using their phone, and they're, walking around. You're pretty much kind of essentially cybernetic halfway, a little bit. That's kind of what like the Neuralink is related to, is like the throughput of information. I think that is like a really big thing. That's like already happening, and it's very obvious the effects it's happening. Some good, some it's bad. But yeah, no, in terms of the transhuman thing, where I kind of digress is just the living for everything. I more power to anybody who wants to work for. I'm not I don't personally, I'm not motivated by that. But I think the AI stuff, in terms of, I think there is some reason to suspect that it'll get very advanced. I'm not sure about AGI, but I do think it's useful in terms of personal assistant. I think it's like a big thing. I'd say like the downside of it is just like what we've seen with psychiatry and stuff. It, obviously, like Gennady was saying, it's not like he's made the personal choice. Like, you made the personal choice not to destroy your body to become some, investment banking bro who's, coked out of his mind all day so he can do trades or whatever, or like mergers. But I think generally speaking, the more people get control over variables, whether it's like food, right? So we saw it with agriculture, with like the more we were able to genetically modify food and change and extract oils from different things. It's not like that gets used for, it might be used eventually in the beginning for a beneficial manner, but generally speaking, what happens is the efficiency, essentially, and we saw this with the Industrial Revolution. The idea was, we're going to industrialize, and then you'll have to, we'll work 3 days a week, and we'll have so much more free time because everything's much more efficient. In reality, what happens is, the producers make a lot more money, and they scale up a lot more. And then, basically scabs come across and they say, yeah, well, I'll work, he wants to work 3 days, I'll work 4 days, I'll work 5 days.
Hey, easy there, Karl Marx.
Yeah. So I think there is some cause for, not even concern, because I don't think concern really matters, because like what's going to happen is going to happen. But like awareness, that I think there is the downside of like the customization thing. But I do think cybernetics and like just like, for example, Zach with the heart stuff, there is the the obviously upside. Like, I'm not against like medicine or people learning how to do it. I just think, for me personally, it's like I'm not super motivated by that.
Okay, I want to interject something real quick.
Yeah.
And let me try and like totally blow your mind, Paul.
Go for it.
Give me the opportunity to for just a second. So, what if living forever is not an ends, it is a means?
What do you mean? Okay, so elaborate on that a little bit.
So what I mean is that you can have many, many goals, many of which I have, which aren't even fully elaborated yet in my own mind because of the limits of my cogitative power. But I know that my time on Earth is kind of finite and the clock's ticking, and that right now there is something that's going to constrain me, a hard constraint on me being able to continue to pursue and learn and grow and achieve those goals, whatever they may be. Maybe they take more than a lifetime to do. They say something is like the work of a lifetime. What if it's the work of a couple lifetimes? There are some things I'm interested in doing that may take a couple lifetimes, and I see living forever, just longer enough, as a means to be able to achieve those goals rather than the ends of just.
Yeah, I see your point. I don't have any like strong negative emotions against it, right? I'm not like advocating for people to stop doing whatever but for me personally, it's like, in terms of like, it's like placing your bets, I'm pretty skeptical on like the outcome of it. And I also do believe that once you die, I do believe in like the eternal recurrence sort of thing. So I kind of think we loop around eventually. Somehow we get around to doing the same thing over and over again. So I'm not too but I don't know. For me, it's I'm fine. When I check out, I check out. Maybe I'm just less ambitious or something.
Yeah.
Maybe
you'll get reincarnated into an actual Funko Pop. Like
yeah.
somebody.
Yeah, that's my punishment. I get what you're saying. I'm just skeptical of it, and it's also, I think, like, in terms of bets, like, I'd much rather invest my time in stuff that's more human. I think for me, a lot of the value is that I'm going to die, and then there's a hard limit to it. And for me, it's like, it's not even about achieving things; it's more about the experience of trying to do stuff. And when I look back, barring getting hit by a car, having a heart attack randomly, like, just say I'm on my deathbed, I can look back on my life and be like, oh, like, I did my best, I learned the XYZ, now I can rest. That's really my thing. Is like it's almost like a Protestant.
You're being coerced by death into having that sort of philosophy. Philosophers fall for this all the time. If we were to get hit on the head every Tuesday with a baseball bat, randomly, just come out of the sky and bat all of us, philosophers would think about all the reasons it was such a good thing and how it toughened us, it hardened us up, it made the bat-free days all the sweeter. And it's the same way with life. It's saying, well, once it ends, it's, that's what makes it so sweet. It's like, well, if you gave people the opportunity, they choose not to get hit on the head with a bat. And I think a lot of people are going to want to choose not to die.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right.
That's fair. I think it's I don't know. I think we're coming from a different perspective, even like personality wise. Like, I'm more of a misanthrope, I think, than a lot of people. So it is. I get what you're saying. There are people who genuinely. No, that's true. Yeah. But it's for me. It's I'm not. I've never particularly been in love with living either. So I'm not exactly like holy. No, I really. So I'm not like I need to die, but I'm like when I'll do my best, and then whenever time comes.
Well, listen, guys, we're going to be concluding this stream. I just wanted to get everybody's final thoughts, and I really appreciate this. And this is what BTR does. It brings together people who are in hospitals, people who are not in hospitals, people who are human Funko Pops. This is what BTR is all about. And for those who are just tuning in from Gennady or Chris or Paul, know that what...
Smash that like
button. Smash that like button. Exactly.
Super chats.
Need those super chats. It all helps the algorithm out.
Max out the credit card.
Exactly. Yeah, max out your daddy's credit card. So what would be a great way of supporting Break the Rules is if you become a patron, though. So patreon.com/breaktherules is where you go. Here is the link. When you become a patron, you are going to get exquisitely beautiful magnets. Well, before I get to the magnets, when you become a $5 patron, you're going to get the MP3s of the episodes after they come out. You're also going to get Patreon privilege. What that means is that you, as a patron, can come on the episodes and hang out and crack wise. That would be more towards like the second half. Although I would have to specify, like in the beginning, hey, we're going to do this episode. I would welcome all the patrons to come in here. Patreon-only episodes are coming as well. BTR right now has to grow, and it is thanks to you guys that it is going to keep growing. When you become a $20 patron, you are going to get this beautiful one-of-a-kind wooden sculpture magnet created by my father, Lev Polyakov. Now, this is a random design. It's going to be whatever comes into his head. But if you want it to be a custom design, that's more. That's $50. $50 patronage is going to get you a very beautiful Styx Hexenhammer 666 Dragon, which I had over here. I'm not sure where I put that image. Here, I'm going to find that image in a bit. But the point is that you are going to get either the Styx Dragon if you are a fan of Styx, or if you are lukewarm to Styx or whatever, you are going to get a custom wooden magnet. Whatever design you want, it'll be yours. If you want like a little Funko Pop magnet, I'm sure my dad's going to be able to make one of Loki, the Loki Paul Town magnet, or maybe that crazy raccoon from that, what's that movie, Paul?
Over the Hedge.
Over the Hedge.
Raccoon,
yeah, you never know what kind of trouble making that raccoon's going to, he lights a match, and next thing you know, a whole farm, a whole farmer's legacy that he wanted to pass on to his kids just goes up in flames.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what you guys have to know. Destruction is what makes creation worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of like my quote about war, being, painting with blood. It's like, yeah, I mean, it is a horrible thing, but at the end of the day, there has to be some kind of pressure, some friction for some kind of growth, I think. However that may be. I'm not saying that should be as far as war goes. I think it could be in the human
Let me
mind.
make a quick anecdote with that, and that's how Gennady and I started to actually become friends. Is some of that friction on this show when that weird little "I'm a fascist."
Oh,
and,
that guy, yeah. Wait, I think Paul may know him. Paul,
Sonny?
do you? Yeah, Sonny.
Well, yeah, what happened with him?
he came on BTR and Gennady was talking, and he was all like, "Oh, I'm a fascist, and you're not an Anglo, bro. Go home because you're not an Anglo." And it was just so like pathetic, but it got Gennady, so he boom, and it was fun, and I
Yes,
like seeing it. It's
Sonny's a
entertaining.
professional troll, and all kinds. It's very interesting just think about all the sagas that
Look at that
BTR.
here, Matt.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to see that though, because BTR goes through all kinds of sagas. But what warms the cockles of my heart is that Gennady, after that, you came back, and it was a great pleasure to have you back, and to have people like yourself and Chris and Zach and Paul come in together who I don't think you would have ever been able to talk like this, as far as like what are the chances of Paul Town talking with Gennady and Zach and Chris. You know, this is a very special thing that we're able to do with the internet right now, which is why I think that there are ways of utilizing technology for the better to bring people together. That's what BTR is all about, and it's what BTR is going to keep on being about when you support it. So smash that subscribe button, smash the like button like Zach said, and support this thing. It's going to grow. We are going to get really, really big guests on soon, and it is just going to blow up. No other conversations like this are taking place anywhere on the internet. This is the Big Brain channel. This is where it's at. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Subscribe to all these wonderful people. Wait, lastly, what are you guys working on? I want a show for you guys too. Gennady, what do you have going on?
Well, as I said, the launch of the Transhuman Club, you can already see the website at transhuman.club. This will be a gathering place for people who are interested in the kinds of ideas that we discussed today, and they will have opportunities to view our salons, including the one with Lev that we held in July of 2021, and also engage in collaborations, artistic collaborations, technological collaborations, educating people about these fascinating developments that are poised to transform the human condition. So we at the US Transhumanist Party are focused on politics and policy. The Transhuman Club will be focused on everything besides that. So we may be reaching out to students in schools. We may be reaching out to people of other political persuasions who want to collaborate with us in a purely apolitical context. And we're going to do it in a way that's entertaining and interesting and definitely artistically rich.
Chris, anything we have to look forward from the great Chris Bartlett? And by the way, are you related to the guy who created Hey Arnold, Craig Bartlett, or no? Or is that just a...
No, my brother's the playwright and screenwriter Mike Bartlett. Not Craig Bartlett, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just summary, AGI and transhumanism is coming. It's coming soon. It could be great for everybody, whether you want to be on board or not. But I do think it's under threat. I think there's a risk, a genuine risk of it being sort of captured by corporations. I think in the long run it'll be made free, but we could avoid that sort of negative side. I'm still writing. I'm still working on books. I might start putting stuff out in articles because I'm not very good at finishing books. Maybe Paul can give me some tips.
And where can people find you on Twitter?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter if you're interested. At Bartlett Chris J. Yeah.
That's it. I'm putting the link right here.
Yeah,
excellent.
My profile picture looks pretty much exactly like this, but in ASCII. Yeah, I have a computer game too, but I don't think it's relevant. So
no. Please tell me about the computer game. I completely forgot.
It's a mobile game. If you like death and destruction, it's the opposite of what I try to do in my other work. But yeah, it's called UFO Enemy Known, and it's available on Android and on an iPhone as well.
And what did you do for this game?
I helped design it. I worked on some of the algorithms, but a lot of the heavy lifting was done by my oldest son, actually.
Nice.
Shouldn't you be working on longevity escape velocity of the game?
Oh, I love this. Look at the I love the style over here with the lizard guy and that guy, by the way, with the lips. He kind of looks like that really popular game about Mr. Balding's World or something like that. No, I'm confusing the guy who was on the China stream. I'm so sorry, Chris Balding. I'm so sorry that I'm comparing you to this dude with the lips. What was that game, Paul? There was this really popular game that came out. You remember where there was this guy in the classroom? He was running after you, and you had to.
How long ago is this? Is this an old game?
No, it's not that old, but it looks old. It's like Baldi something. Hold on.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Baldi's, all right, game, class. Okay, while I'm looking this up, Zach, since you came here, anything we have to look forward to from the great Zach? What's going on?
Can you screen share for a second? Show my art?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, let's see what I could do. And you have really beautiful art. What I could do is I can show it on the OBS. So I saved one of the images here. There we go. All right, look at that. That is a very beautiful. It is one of these beautiful structures. Is this in 3D you made?
Yeah. This is something. There's some AI tools that came out that I'm keeping a trade secret for now.
Whoa,
the
that is.
Transhumanist Party can make some. Figure out how to monetize it and make us all live forever, but it'll be common really soon. But,
Well, that is very beautiful. And where could people find you?
You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Zach Loves China.
China as in find China. Oh, there's not a difference in spelling. They're spelled the same. China is in the country, right? Or the wrestler. There is the wrestler.
That's a whole different Break the Rules stream. We can do another time.
Wait, which one is it though? Is it China the wrestler?
China.
Oh no! Okay, well, so we're gonna have to bring Balding on for that one. Oh boy, that's gonna be exciting. It's see synchronicity right there. I mentioned Balding, and by the way, the game is called Baldi's Basics. That's what the game is called. Baldi's Basics. It's an extremely popular game. You have to see it. If you see the guy, then you'll understand what I'm talking about, Chris. He kind of looks like that guy with the lips. Anyway, Paul Town, what is going on in your world in the days, weeks, years to come? What do we have to look forward to, buddy?
That's a lot of different things. But I'm working on like 2 more books, but I'm moving to Utah, so I'll be around some Mormons. So we'll see about that. I'll probably become a Mormon and.
Mormon Transhumanist.
Mormon Transhumanist, exactly, yeah. But yeah, besides that, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. There is an actual association, Paul. I don't know if you know this. They weren't kidding. There was an actual association called the Mormon Transhumanist Association.
I believe that makes sense.
They're very active.
Yeah, but besides that, I mean, I'm pretty much just working on some I have some different programming projects working on, but nothing big. And really, just my books is the main thing.
And where could people go to buy your wonderful books?
Yeah, if you just go to book.paul.town, it'll redirect to the Amazon page, and you can view my other books by clicking the author page there.
Nice. All right, there we go. And I wanted to say this didn't have a chance, but in the future, I would love to have a stream where we would talk about what Paul's town would look like. Like if you ran a town, okay, whatever. This is the end. This is how you know this is over. All right, listen, guys, thank you so much.